The sound wasn't loud. That was the strange part. In a city built on music, on bass lines leaking out of rooftop lounges, on laughter spilling into the warm night air, this sound was almost nothing. Just the soft, steady tap of a pen against paper. The whisper of a page turning. The faint hum of a printer waking up like an animal that didn't want to be bothered. 3 a.m. Brickell, Miami. The skyline outside the window looked like jewelry laid out on black velvet. Glass towers glowed with sleepless wealth. Down below, Biscayne Bay held the moon the way a mirror holds a face, quiet, cold, perfect. Inside the law office, there was no music, no perfume, no champagne. Only the clean, sterile smell of paper and toner. Nia Holloway sat at the end of a long conference table, the color of dark honey. She wore a navy power suit that should have belonged to a woman stepping onto a morning talk show, not a woman signing documents at an hour when the world was supposed to be unconscious. Her hands trembled. Not from fear, from adrenaline. There's a difference between shaking because you're weak and shaking because you've finally stopped pretending you are. Across from her, attorney Kendra Vaughn didn't sit like a friend. She sat like a scalpel still, sharp, ready. A single lamp lit the table in a tight circle, leaving the corners of the room in shadow. That was how Kendra liked it. Light where the truth lived, darkness where excuses could die. Nia lowered her pen to the first page. Her signature moved across the paper like she had been practicing it in her sleep. Nia Holloway. The ink looked too bold, too final. Kendra slid the next page forward without a word. Nia signed again, and again, and again. Each signature was a small theft, a small return, a small correction. On the glossy surface of the table, Nia could see the reflection of her face, smooth, controlled, composed. She had learned to keep her expression quiet years ago, back when she thought quiet meant peace. Now she knew quiet could mean something else entirely. Kendra's phone vibrated once, face down. She didn't touch it. Instead, she watched Nia with a calm so cold it almost felt kind. "You sure?" Kendra asked. Her voice was low. Not because she was being gentle, because she didn't want the walls to hear. Nia didn't look up. "I've never been more sure of anything." The pen made a soft scratch as she signed another page. Somewhere in the building, an air vent clicked. The office felt like it was holding its breath. Nia paused and rolled her jaw, like she was working out a knot. That's when Kendra's eyes drifted to Nia's cheek. Even in this light, you could see it. A faint swelling. A darker bloom beneath the skin. The beginning of a bruise that hadn't decided what color it wanted to be yet. Nia's fingers brushed the spot absent-mindedly, as if her body was remembering what her face refused to confess. Kendra's gaze sharpened. "Does it hurt?" Nia's mouth twitched in something that almost resembled a smile. "It hurts," she said. "The way truth hurts when you finally say it out loud." Kendra didn't ask who did it. She already knew. Miami had been buzzing all week. Art Week, Art Basel, 1,000 cameras, 1,000,000 eyes. The kind of week where reputations were built and destroyed between one flash and the next. And tonight, technically, last night had been the jewel of it all. The Basel Builders and Visionaries Awards, a ballroom full of people who looked expensive and smiled like sharks. And at the center of it, Malcolm Holloway, 45, handsome, polished, the kind of man who knew exactly which angle his face needed for the camera, the kind of man people called a visionary because they couldn't admit he was mostly just a performer. To most of Miami, Malcolm Holloway was a trophy husband with a thriving development empire. To Nia, he was 15 years of quiet damage wrapped in a tailored tuxedo. Kendra tapped the stack of papers gently, like she was keeping time. "We have to move fast," she said. "Once the banks open, the chain reaction starts." Nia's eyes lifted for the first time. They were steady, not empty, not numb, just settled. Like a woman who had already walked through the fire in her head and was now simply waiting for the flames to catch up to reality. "What time?" Nia asked. Kendra glanced at her watch. 8. Nia nodded once, as if she'd been expecting that answer all her life. At 8 a.m., the world would wake up. At 8 a.m., Malcolm Holloway would learn the difference between being admired and being protected. Kendra slid the next folder closer. The label on the tab was neat and simple. Ps1. Nia stared at it. A strange calm spread through her chest, the kind you feel right before a storm. Not peace, not relief, precision. Kendra's voice softened, but it didn't warm. "You want to know what I keep thinking about?" Nia didn't answer. Kendra leaned forward slightly. That moment in the ballroom. Nia's hand stopped mid-signature. The pen hovered. Even silence has a pulse. You could hear it in the pause. And then, like a door opening in a house you don't want to remember, the scene returned. The ballroom had been drenched in gold light, crystal chandeliers, white orchids towering like warnings. A stage framed in velvet curtains. The air smelled like expensive cologne and ambition. Nia had walked in beside Malcolm, her hand tucked into the crook of his arm the way a wife was supposed to be displayed. But her dress wasn't an accessory. It was a statement. Midnight blue, fitted like it had been poured onto her body. Hand-embroidered gold detailing catching the light every time she breathed. A gown that looked like the ocean at night, beautiful, deep, and capable of swallowing you whole. And people had noticed. Not just the women, measuring her with careful eyes. The men too, surprised by the quiet elegance they hadn't bothered to see before. Nia had smiled politely as compliments floated toward her like confetti. But Malcolm had kept tightening his smile, the way a man smiles when he's losing control of a room and refuses to admit it. Then Brielle King appeared. 32. Sharp cheekbones, sleek hair pulled back like she was always ready for war. A dress black as ink, hugging her body with the confidence of a woman who never questioned whether she belonged. Brielle moved through the ballroom like she owned it. And in a way, she thought she did. She had that look women get when they're tired of being someone's secret and are ready to become someone's headline. She greeted Malcolm with a smile that was too familiar. She glanced at Nia like Nia was part of the decor. And later, after dinner, after applause, after Malcolm had soaked up attention like sunlight, Nia excused herself to the restroom. She needed one quiet moment. Just one. The powder room was a sanctuary of marble and mirrors. Soft lighting that made every woman look smoother than reality. Nia stood at the sink, pressing her fingers to the cool stone, letting the calm settle back over her shoulders. Then she heard heels. Slow, deliberate, not the hurried footsteps of a woman who needed privacy. The footsteps of a woman who wanted a stage. Brielle's voice came from behind her like silk sliding over a knife. "Well," she said. "Look at you." Nia turned. Brielle smiled, but her eyes didn't. "The perfect wife," Brielle continued, playing her part. Nia didn't flinch. "I didn't realize there were roles assigned." "Oh, there are," Brielle said, stepping closer. "Some of us just know how to upgrade ours." Nia kept her face neutral, but her mind was alert in a way it hadn't been for years. This wasn't a fight for love. This was a fight for position. Brielle tilted her head. "He doesn't love you anymore," she said, as if she were stating the weather. "He's with you because it's convenient." Nia's voice stayed calm. "You seem very sure." Brielle laughed softly. "I'm sure because he tells me the truth. He tells me how quiet you are. How predictable. How—" Her gaze flicked over Nia's dress with a cruel little curl of her lip. "How you've been pretending to be invisible for so long you forgot how to be interesting." Nia stared at her. And in that stare was something Brielle didn't expect. Not jealousy. Not desperation. Not pleading. Just attention. The kind of attention a person gives a puzzle piece they've been missing. Brielle's smile faltered for half a second. Then she stepped even closer, invading Nia's space like a dare. "So here's what's going to happen," Brielle said. "You're going to be smart for once. You're going to disappear. You're going to take whatever little settlement you can get and go back to being whatever you were before you met him." Nia's voice dropped. "And if I don't?" Brielle's eyes sharpened. "Then I'll make you." And then, because Brielle was too angry to keep playing, because she needed to feel powerful right then, right now, her hand came up. The slap cracked through the powder room like a gunshot. Nia's head turned slightly with the impact. For a split second, the world held still. Brielle breathed hard, satisfied, almost smiling. "That," she whispered, "is for forgetting your place." Nia touched her cheek slowly, not dramatic, not shaken. Just measuring the pain, like information. Then she looked Brielle dead in the eye and said, quietly, You just signed your own exit." She walked out, back into the ballroom, back into the lights, back into the crowd. And when people noticed the mark on her face and asked what happened, Nia told the truth. Naomi would have lied. Brielle tried to smirk. And Malcolm laughed. Not a nervous laugh, a real one, the kind that made the air go cold. And he said it, loud enough for people to hear, as if he were delivering a punchline. Maybe this way she'll learn her place. In the office at 3 a.m., Nia's pen hovered above the paper as that sentence echoed in her mind, not because it hurt, because it clarified. Kendra's voice pulled her back. "That was the moment," Kendra said. "Right?" Nia inhaled slowly. "Yes," she said. Kendra nodded once. "Good. Because the law doesn't move on emotions. It moves on moments." Nia set her pen down and looked at the next page. Her signature line waited like a doorway. "What happens at 8?" Nia asked, though her tone suggested she already knew. Kendra finally flipped her phone over. The screen was filled with reminders. "Call schedules, names, timestamps. Calvin Brooks is on standby," Kendra said. "Has the bank's corporate compliance director. Has going to confirm the freeze the second the system goes live." Nia's eyes didn't widen. Her pulse didn't spike. She simply nodded, as if she were listening to a grocery list. "And then?" she asked. Kendra's lips pressed together. "Then the email access changes. The board notifications go out. The accounts he's used to moving like his own bloodstream locked." Nia's voice came out soft, "and he won't be able to stop it." Kendra leaned forward, her eyes unwavering. "No, not before it hits." Nia picked up the pen again. This next signature felt different, heavier, like the last step before a cliff. But she didn't hesitate. She wrote her name, Nia Holloway. The ink dried quickly, as if the paper itself wanted to move on. Outside, Miami glittered. Inside, something in Nia's life finally stopped glittering and started turning into steel. Kendra pushed the final folder toward her. Nia looked at it, then up at Kendra. For the first time that night, her expression shifted, not into anger, not into joy, into something deeper. A woman who had spent years being quiet had finally found the exact volume of silence that could destroy a man. Kendra's voice was almost a whisper. "When this starts, you can't go back." Nia's answer came immediately. "I don't want to." She opened the folder. At the top of the first page, the title was printed in bold, official letters, "Transfer of Majority Interest." Nia stared at the words. Then she smiled. Not the polite smile she wore in ballrooms, not the compliant smile she wore in penthouses. A private smile. A dangerous one. And if you're listening to this right now, if you're still with me, don't you dare leave the screen. Because what Nia Holloway is about to do at 8 a.m. isn't just a comeback. It's a legal power flip so clean it feels unreal. It's an empire seized overnight without a single scream. So, before we go back to the beginning, before we rewind 6 months and show you how a silent wife became the most dangerous person in the room, do me a favor. Hit that like button if you want to see Malcolm Holloway's face when his world stops working. And drop a comment telling me, what time are you watching, and where are you listening from? What city, what state, what country? Because trust me, the most dramatic part of this story? It hasn't even happened yet. 6 months earlier, Miami still looked like a postcard, the kind that lies. The sun rose clean over Biscayne Bay, turning the water into a sheet of glass. Boats moved like silent signatures across the horizon. Palm fronds shook lazily, as if they had never heard of betrayal. From the street, the Brickell Towers glowed with the soft arrogance of money. Perfect lines, perfect windows, perfect lives, stacked floor by floor. On the 42nd floor of one of those towers, Nia Holloway woke up at 6:30 a.m., the way she had woken up for 15 years, quietly, not because she was considerate, because she had learned that even a footstep could be interpreted as a request. And in her house, requests were punished. She sat up without disturbing the sheets and looked at the space beside her. Malcolm was still asleep, 45 years old and still handsome in a way that felt engineered. His fade was always clean. His teeth always white. His skin always bright. Like he had discovered the secret of never sweating, never worrying, never doubting himself. Even asleep, He held the bed like it belonged to him. Nia slid her feet onto the cold floor and stood. Her body moved with the practiced precision of a woman who had spent years perfecting the art of being invisible in her own life. In the bathroom, the marble was chilled under her toes. The mirror was too honest. The lighting was too kind. At 40, Nia still had beauty, serene, controlled, the kind that didn't beg for attention, but it was a worn beauty now. Not because she had aged poorly, because she had been loved poorly. She pulled her hair into a sleek bun, the same style every day, the same controlled face every day, a routine that looked like discipline but felt like survival. When she dressed, she didn't reach for something bright. She never did anymore. She chose a discreet, two-piece suit in a muted tone that wouldn't catch Malcolm's eye for the wrong reason. She didn't dress for herself. She dressed for peace. Downstairs, though, in a brickle penthouse downstairs meant a second level that floated above the city like a private cloud. The kitchen was immaculate. The appliances were silver and expensive. The countertops were stone so smooth it felt like touching ice. Nia turned on the espresso machine and watched the dark liquid pour like ink. She set artisan bread in the toaster, arranged fruit on a plate, warmed a small bowl of oatmeal the exact way Malcolm liked it, not too thick, not too sweet. People would have called it a dream. A high-rise view, luxury finishes, a husband who wore suits like armor and shook hands with the kind of men whose names ended up on buildings. But Nia knew the truth. Luxury can be a cage when you didn't choose the lock. The sound of footsteps on the staircase tightened her spine before her mind even registered what it was. Malcolm appeared at the top of the stairs, already dressed, already polished, already scrolling through his phone like it was more important than the person who had been breathing next to him all night. He didn't say good morning. He didn't look at her first. His attention landed on the counter, then the table, then his reflection in the glass. "Is my blue shirt pressed?" he asked. Nia kept her face smooth. "It's pressed and hanging in your closet." He walked past her, taking his seat like a king claiming a throne. He glanced at his phone again, thumb moving fast. Messages, emails, deals that mattered, conversations that made him feel seen. Nia stood for a moment, hands folded loosely in front of her, waiting to be dismissed. That was the shape of her mornings. Malcolm took a sip of coffee and made a sound not quite displeased, not quite satisfied, a noise that meant he was grading her. "I have a meeting at 9, he said. "Important people. Don't call me. Don't interrupt me with whatever. Whatever." That's what her voice had become to him. Whatever. "Of course," Nia said, and let the word land softly, the way she had learned to do. "Everything is ready." He ate while scanning emails, his expression shifting with each line like he was acting out a private drama no one else was invited to understand. And then, like he remembered she existed, he looked up. Not at her face. At the small sewing kit on the counter. Nia had left it there by accident the night before. A measuring tape, a pincushion, a folded sketch page with quick lines. The smallest evidence of her having a life that didn't orbit him. Malcolm's mouth curled. "How's that little project of yours going?" he asked, the words dressed in fake casualness. "You still playing fashion designer?" There it was. The humiliation he saved for breakfast, like a vitamin. Nia felt the familiar sting in her chest. But she didn't move. She didn't let it show. She had trained her emotions to stay behind glass. "It's going well," she said. "I finished 3 gowns this week." Malcolm laughed, loud enough to make the kitchen feel smaller. "Gowns," he repeated, like the word tasted funny. "For who? Some neighborhood women trying to look rich at brunch?" Nia kept her voice level. "Clients, people who pay. Pocket change," he said immediately. "That's not income, Nia. That's cute." He shook his head as if he were disappointed in her for choosing oxygen. "You're 40 years old. Don't you think it's time to grow up and do something serious?" In the mirror behind him, Nia could see her face. Serene, polite, perfectly controlled. But inside, something had started shifting months ago, something small at first, like a crack in ice. It wasn't rage yet, it was something more dangerous. Curiosity, not the innocent kind. The kind that asks, "Who are you when no one is watching?" The kind that starts collecting facts instead of excuses. Nia didn't argue. She didn't plead. She didn't defend herself the way she once would have, years ago, When she still believed that love could be negotiated, she simply said, "I enjoy it." Malcolm's eyes flickered with irritation. He hated when she stayed calm. He hated when she didn't perform pain for him. He finished breakfast quickly, stood, adjusted his cufflinks, and grabbed his keys. "It'll be late tonight," he said. "Business dinner. Don't wait up." He leaned down and kissed her cheek the way a man kisses a relative at a funeral, automatic, empty, barely there. Then he walked out, leaving the scent of expensive cologne behind like a taunt. When the door closed, Nia stayed still for a few seconds, the silence settling around her like dust. Then she exhaled. Not a sob, not a sigh, a release. She cleared the table with deliberate movements and rinsed the dishes until her hands were numb. She wiped the counters until they shined. A ritual, a distraction. A way of controlling something when so much felt uncontrollable. And when she was done, she walked into the small office nook tucked behind the living room, Malcolm's home workspace, which had slowly become her observation room. She sat at the desk and opened the laptop. Malcolm thought she didn't understand technology. That was part of his comfort. Part of his arrogance. He liked believing she was simple because it made him feel superior. But Nia wasn't simple. She was quiet, and Malcolm had confused those two things the way foolish men always do. On the screen, there were folders Malcolm never bothered to lock. Calendars, emails, notes from meetings, PDFs labeled with project names that sounded like luxury: Bayfront Pearl, Palm Crown, Azure Reserve. Nia didn't click randomly. She didn't dig like a desperate woman. She moved like a woman taking inventory. For months, she had noticed small changes. Malcolm coming home later but looking oddly refreshed, as if he had been fed somewhere else. His phone never leaving his hand, even when he showered. His smile appearing at strange times, small, private smiles at his screen. And most of all, the way he started caring about his appearance again, like he was auditioning. Nia had asked herself if she was imagining it. She had tried to dismiss it as stress, business, age, midlife, whatever excuse women were trained to swallow, but excuses weren't facts. And Nia had reached the point where she wanted facts. That afternoon, Malcolm hosted a meeting in the penthouse. He loved doing that, bringing colleagues into their home so he could show off his view, his space, his life. A subtle flex. Nia played her role perfectly. She served espresso and sparkling water. She arranged pastries on a tray. She smiled at the right moments, and that's when she saw her, Brielle King, 32. Modern beauty with a sharp edge to it, like she had been shaped by ambition instead of softness. Her hair was pulled into a sleek ponytail. Her dress was tailored, minimal, expensive. Her eyes were focused in a way that didn't feel friendly. Brielle glanced at Malcolm with something that lingered too long to be professional. Malcolm glanced back with something he hadn't given Nia in years. Interest, not love. Interest is worse. Because love can fade, interest is a choice. Brielle accepted her coffee and smiled at Nia. But the smile didn't reach her eyes. "Thank you, Mrs. Holloway," Brielle said. "Malcolm is so lucky to have such a devoted wife." Devoted. The word was sweet on the surface, but underneath, it carried a blade. Nia smiled politely, because that was the only language the room allowed. Then she stepped away and watched. She watched how Brielle leaned in when Malcolm spoke, how Malcolm's voice warmed when he answered her, how their laughter sounded like a private joke no one else was invited into. Nia didn't confront. Confrontation was noise, and noise had never protected her. That night, Malcolm came to bed late. He slipped under the covers and reached for his phone immediately, the screen lighting his face. He smiled. A real smile. Nia lay facing the other direction, her eyes open, her body still. In the dim light, she watched his reflection in the window. He looked like a man who thought he had the world. When his breathing finally deepened, Nia waited. 5 minutes, 10. Then she got up, silent. She walked down to the lower level where her sewing studio was tucked away, the one place in the penthouse that still felt like hers. Fabric bolts lined the wall, sketches pinned neatly, patterns folded, scissors placed with precision. A small world built from thread and patience. Nia sat at her work table and let the mask fall for just a moment. Not into tears, into anger. But it wasn't a wild anger. It wasn't messy. It was cold, calculated. She opened a drawer and pulled out a notebook. Not a journal of feelings, a journal of facts, dates, times, names, behaviors. Little notes that looked harmless until you stacked them together and saw the pattern. She wrote, Brielle King, 3:14 p.m. Looked at Malcolm like he belonged to her. Malcolm smiled back. Her pen paused. Then she wrote, He thinks I don't see. She stared at the words for a long moment, as if they were speaking back. Then she reached for her phone. There was a number she hadn't called in years. A friend from her past. A woman who didn't live by excuses. A woman who lived by law. Attorney Kendra Vaughn. Nia hesitated for exactly one breath. Then she dialed. The phone rang once. Twice. On the third ring, Kendra answered, her voice thick with sleep but already sharp with awareness. Nia? Kendra said. Is everything okay? Nia looked around her studio, at the quiet evidence of who she still was beneath the marriage. Her voice came out low. Not okay, she said. But, clear. A pause. Kendra's tone shifted, fully awake now. Talk to me. Nia swallowed, but not in fear. Indecision. I need to ask you something, she said. And I need you to answer me like a lawyer, not like a friend. Kendra's silence on the other end felt like a door opening. Facts, Kendra said finally. Give me facts. Nia's eyes drifted to the upstairs office, Malcolm's workspace, where she had seen the glimpse of a file earlier in the day. A file that had flashed her signature across the page before Malcolm had snapped it shut like she was a child who wandered too close. A signature she didn't remember making, a paper that didn't feel like nothing. Nia's voice lowered even more. I saw my name on something, she said. And I don't think he wanted me to. Kendra didn't ask for details yet. She asked the only question that mattered. Can you get it? Nia's heartbeat slowed. Her body felt suddenly heavy with focus. Yes, she said. Kendra's voice went quiet, dangerous quiet. Then do it, she said. And tomorrow, we meet. Nia ended the call and sat in the stillness of her studio. Above her, Malcolm slept like a man with nothing to lose. In the city outside, Miami glittered and lied and laughed. And in that quiet room, Nia Holloway realized something that would change the next 6 months of her life. She had been waiting for a marriage to improve, but her marriage was not a thing that improved. It was a thing she had to survive. And survival, real survival, was never passive. It was preparation. Nia stood, smoothed her suit jacket hanging on a chair as if she were smoothing her own composure, and turned off the studio light. She walked upstairs toward the office. Toward the safe. Toward the documents Malcolm thought were his. And with each step, her emotions didn't grow louder. They grew sharper. Because this wasn't the moment she would scream. This was the moment she would start calculating, the exact moment she would stop being invisible. Nia didn't go upstairs like a woman about to start a fight. She went upstairs like a woman about to take inventory. The hallway lights were dimmed to their nighttime setting, a soft golden glow meant to feel romantic. In that quiet penthouse, romance had long since been replaced by routine, by the steady, invisible labor of keeping Malcolm Holloway comfortable. And Malcolm, asleep in the master bedroom, looked comfortable enough to mistake his peace for permanence. Nia moved past the bedroom door without a sound. Malcolm's office sat behind a pane of smoked glass, tucked into a corner with a view of the city like a reward. During the day, it was his kingdom screens glowing with spreadsheets and renderings, contracts stacked like trophies. At night, it was just a room. And rooms, Nia was learning, could be entered. She slipped inside and closed the door with the gentlest touch. The air smelled faintly of cologne, printer ink, and the kind of coffee Malcolm drank when he wanted to feel important. A desk lamp threw a narrow cone of light onto the surface where his laptop sat closed, as if it was above sleeping. Nia didn't touch the laptop. She didn't need to. She'd been watching Malcolm's habits the way a quiet woman watches storms form over water. Subtle shifts, small warning signs, the way the air pressure changes before the wind. Malcolm always hid his paperwork, not his digital trail. That's what he believed, anyway. Nia slid open the top drawer. Nothing. The next drawer. Pens. A leather-bound notepad. A fancy business card case. Little props that suggested control. The third drawer stuck slightly, like it had been opened and slammed too many times. Nia pulled it open. There, under a thin folder labeled Bayfront Pearl, was another folder, plain and unmarked. She lifted it out like it could bite. Inside were contracts, deeds, a scanned copy of something with her signature bold, slanted slightly to the right, stamped beside Malcolm's. And when Nia saw the line that read, "Joint tenancy with right of survivorship," something cold moved through her chest. Not fear, recognition. Because she remembered signing papers over the years. Malcolm had always framed them the same way. Bank formalities, routine. "Just sign here, baby. I don't have time to explain." Shed signed because she trusted him. Shed signed because she wanted to be a supportive wife. Shed signed because she believed love meant surrendering confusion. Now, with those pages in her hands, Nia realized something sharp enough to hurt. She hadn't been trusting. She'd been trained. Nia pulled her phone out and took photos, slow, careful, ensuring every number, every date, every paragraph was captured. Then she flipped to the back. A clause stood out. A power of attorney provision tied to project accounts and transfers. Nia read it twice, lips barely moving, heart steady. It wasn't the kind of clause Malcolm would have noticed in the moment. It was the kind he would have buried inside pages of legal language because he assumed no one would ever read that far. Not her. Nia slid the papers back exactly as she found them, down to the angle of the folder and the way the corner sat beneath the Bayfront Pearl label. Then she closed the drawer. And for the first time in a long time, she felt something she hadn't felt inside her marriage. Not hope. Power. Quiet, waiting power. She returned to bed with the same careful silence. Malcolm didn't stir. He didn't know he'd just lost the advantage of secrecy. He didn't know his silent wife had just stopped being silent in the way that mattered. The next morning, the world ran on schedule. Malcolm left early with his phone glued to his hand. He kissed Nia's cheek without looking at her eyes and muttered something about a site visit, an investor lunch, and don't forget, as if her existence was a reminder app. Nia waited until the elevator doors closed and the penthouse swallowed his absence. Then she got dressed, not in the muted suit she wore for peace, but in a clean cream blouse and tailored slacks. Nothing dramatic. Just crisp enough to remind herself she still had a spine. She drove to a coffee shop in Coconut Grove where the greenery felt like it was hiding secrets for wealthy people. Kendra Vaughn was already there. She sat near the back, facing the entrance, a habit built from years of legal work and sharper instincts. Her hair was cut close, her posture disciplined. She wore a dark blazer that looked like it could survive a hurricane. When Nia sat down, Kendra didn't smile. She didn't ask about Malcolm. She asked the only question that mattered. "Did you get it?" Nia slid her phone across the table and opened the photo gallery. Kendra's eyes scanned the images quickly, the way surgeons scan scans. Her jaw tightened. "Jesus," she murmured. Nia's voice came out soft, almost calm. "Tell me what it means." Kendra looked up. For the first time, warmth flickered, not comfort, but anger on someone else's behalf. "It means," Kendra said, "you're not a guest in your own life. You're a legal owner. And Malcolm's been moving like he's the only one with keys." Nia didn't flinch. She felt her pulse slow, as if her body was adjusting to the truth. "How much?" Nia asked. Kendra's mouth pressed into a thin line. "I'm not going to guess. I'm going to confirm. But Nia, from what I'm seeing here, this is serious. This isn't just a cheating husband. This is financial control. Has built projects on marital assets and treated you like a signature machine." Nia stared at the table grain, as if her brain needed something physical to hold on to. She expected to feel devastated. She expected to feel stupid. Instead, she felt awake. Kendra leaned forward. "Listen to me. The law doesn't move on heartbreak. It moves on documentation. If we do this right, you can protect yourself, and if you choose, take control of what you already own." "We," Nia repeated quietly. Kendra nodded. "We." Nia's throat tightened. Not with tears, with relief that she didn't have to fight in the dark anymore. Kendra slid a small notebook across the table. "Start writing down everything. Dates, times, meetings, anything you hear him mention. Not how you feel. Facts." Nia's lips twitched. "I already started." Kendra's eyebrows lifted slightly, impressed. Of course she had. Silent wives don't survive 15 years by being helpless. They survive by noticing. And sometimes noticing becomes strategy. Kendra glanced at Naya's face, then down at her hands. Has he hit you? Naya's answer came immediately. No. Kendra didn't look relieved. She looked thoughtful. Has he humiliated you? She asked. Nia almost laughed, but it wasn't funny. Yes, Nia said. Every day. Kendra leaned back, eyes narrowing at the ceiling like she could see the next 6 months laid out above them. Okay, she said. Then here's what we do. You keep playing your role. You keep the house running. You keep the mask on. And behind the scenes, we build a file so solid, Malcolm can't charm his way out of it. Nia nodded slowly. Kendra's voice dropped. This is your silent wife strategy. Not silence because you're weak. Silence because you're gathering ammunition. Nia held Kendra's gaze. And Brielle? Kendra didn't hesitate. Well, deal with Brielle when we have to. But Malcolm is the engine. Brielle's just enjoying the ride. Nia looked out the window at the morning sun spilling through the trees. Miami looked harmless in daylight. But Nia had lived long enough to know daylight was just a filter. Over the next weeks, Nia lived 2 lives. In the mornings, she still made Malcolm's coffee. She still laid out his shirts. She still smiled with that polite, empty expression that made people think she was content. She still stood beside him at networking brunches and smiled at women who asked what it was like to be so supported by a man like Malcolm. And in the evenings, when Malcolm came home later and later with that refreshed look, the look of a man who had been admired by someone younger, Nia would kiss his cheek and say, "Long day?" And Malcolm would say, "You wouldn't understand," as if her intelligence was a joke he could keep telling without consequences. Then Malcolm would fall asleep, and Nia would go downstairs into her studio and become a different kind of woman, a woman who read, a woman who learned, a woman who stopped confusing love with obedience. Kendra introduced her to a forensic accountant named Marcus, who worked quietly, efficiently, and didn't ask emotional questions. He asked numbers. Kendra also looped in a corporate compliance contact at the bank, Calvin Brooks. He didn't join meetings. He didn't gossip. He simply told Kendra what procedures could be triggered if a majority holder submitted valid documentation. The first time Nia heard the phrase majority holder, she sat very still. It sounded unreal, like a title that belonged to someone else. But the documents didn't care how she felt. They cared what was signed. And Nia Holloway had signed. The deeper they dug, the clearer the picture became. Malcolm had built Holloway Development Group on a foundation that wasn't just his ambition. It was marital property. It was shared ownership. It was Nia's legal stake hidden in plain sight, disguised under a marriage that Malcolm ran like a business he owned outright. And the more Nia learned, the less she felt like a woman being betrayed. She started to feel like a woman being robbed. That shift mattered. Because betrayal makes you cry. Robbery makes you plan. One night, Malcolm came home close to 2 a.m. He smelled like whiskey and something floral perfume that didn't belong in their bedroom. He slid into bed and didn't even bother with an excuse. Nia lay beside him, eyes open, listening to the rhythm of his breathing as it slowed. When his phone buzzed softly on the nightstand, she didn't reach for it. She didn't need to see the message to know it was Brielle. Instead, she stared at the ceiling and felt a strange clarity settle over her like a blanket. This was the Trophy Husband Betrayal. Not because Malcolm was a prize, because he needed to be seen as one. He needed applause the way some people need air. And when Nia stopped clapping, he went looking for an audience. 3 weeks before Art Week, Malcolm walked into breakfast in a mood. He was wearing one of his custom suits, the kind he reserved for meetings with big investors. His watch caught the light when he lifted his wrist to check the time, as if the world was supposed to admire him for being punctual. Basel Builders and Visionaries Awards, he announced while scrolling his phone. I'm nominated again. Nia poured coffee into his cup. Congratulations. He didn't look up. You're coming with me, he said, like it was an order. And do not embarrass me. Nia's gaze stayed steady. How would I embarrass you? Malcolm finally looked at her then. Eyes sharp. You know exactly what I mean, he said. Don't show up in one of your little crafts. Crafts. That word hit like a slap in slow motion. Nia smiled politely. Of course, she said. but inside, her mind turned. She walked downstairs into her studio after Malcolm left and stared at her fabric shelves. If Malcolm wanted her to be invisible, she would do the opposite. Not loudly, elegantly, like a knife hidden in silk. She chose midnight blue satin with a weight that felt like water. She chose gold thread for embroidery. Not glitter. Not cheap sparkle. Gold that looked like money when it caught the light. She worked at night when the city outside softened and the penthouse got quiet. She stitched with careful hands, the needle sliding in and out of fabric like she was sewing time itself. Every stitch became a vow to herself, not a vow to Malcolm, to Nia, and while she sewed, she listened. She listened to Malcolm's calls, his laughter, the way he said Brielle's name when he thought no one heard. And she recorded facts. Brielle, 7:42 p.m. Laughing, Malcolm says, "You're the future." Investor lunch, Malcolm mentions moving funds, Calvin Bank. Site visit, Biscayne project, mentions signed authority, my name. It wasn't romantic. It was forensic. It was how women survive men who think love makes them blind. Kendra met with Nia weekly. Different locations. Different times. Discretion like a religion. One afternoon, Kendra slid a printout across the table. "This is your stake," she said. Nia looked down and felt something tighten. Numbers, percentages, assets. It was a language Malcolm had always kept to himself. Now it sat in front of her like a confession. "You're a co-owner on multiple projects," Kendra continued. "And based on the way he structured things carelessly, there's a path where you become majority on the holding entity. It's not guaranteed. But it's possible." Nia swallowed. "What's the catch?" she asked. Kendra's eyes didn't soften. "The catch is timing. And proof." Nia's voice came out calm. "I can handle timing." Kendra nodded once, satisfied. "Good, because the right moment won't be handed to you. We'll have to take it." Art Week arrived like a fever. Miami filled with people who looked like they were dressed for a photo shoot at all times. Galleries buzzed. Rooftop parties spilled into dawn. Cameras flashed on sidewalks. Conversations were loud, layered with money, deals, name-dropping. It was the perfect week for Malcolm. He thrived in it. He moved through the city like he was being filmed, even when he wasn't. Nia watched him more closely than ever. Not with pain, with study. The day of the awards gala, the sky was clean and bright, the kind of Miami weather that convinced people nothing bad could happen. Nia woke early and moved through her routine, but her hands were steadier. Her mind was quieter, not because she had found peace, because she had found direction. In the late afternoon, she stepped into her gown. The fabric hugged her like a secret. The gold embroidery caught the light in a way that made her look like something expensive and untouchable. Malcolm walked into the bedroom while she adjusted the last clasp. For a moment, he said nothing. The silence didn't feel admiring. It felt startled, like Head looked up from his own reflection and realized there was someone else in the room. "Not bad," he said finally, voice measured. "I guess you learned something." "Eventually." Nia didn't respond. She didn't need approval from a man who didn't know how to give it cleanly. She just turned and looked at him, calm and unreadable. "Tonight will be special," she said. Malcolm smirked. "It's always special when I'm being honored." Nia's smile was small. "You're right," she said softly. "It will be." The gala was held at a waterfront hotel in Bal Harbour, where the lobby smelled like money and the floors shined like polished stone. Inside the ballroom, crystal chandeliers poured golden light over tables dressed in white linen. Orchids rose from centerpieces like living sculptures. The air was thick with perfume, cologne, and the quiet violence of competition. Nia stepped in beside Malcolm, and she felt eyes turn, not just toward him, toward her. Malcolm didn't notice at first. He was busy shaking hands, flashing his smile, collecting compliments like tips. Then Chairman Curtis Whitaker approached, deep voice, broad shoulders, the kind of man whose approval could turn a project from maybe into approved. "Malcolm Holloway?" Whitaker boomed. "My man. Always making the city look good." Malcolm beamed. "Chairman Whitaker. Always a pleasure." Whitaker's eyes shifted to Nia. "And you must be Mrs. Holloway," he said, taking her hand warmly. "It's an honor. You look stunning. That gown, who made it?" Before Nia could answer, Malcolm chuckled lightly. My wife likes little hobbies, he said. Needle and thread, keeps her busy. The familiar humiliation tried to rise in Nia's chest. Tried. But it hit something new. Steel. Nia lifted her chin and smiled, serene and clean. Actually, she said, voice clear, I designed and made it myself. Whitaker's eyebrows rose. For real? For real, Nia said. Dr. Yvette Whitaker, standing beside him, studied Nia with an expression that looked like respect forming in real time. That's not a hobby, doctor. Whitaker murmured, that's talent. Malcolm's smile tightened. Nia felt it. She felt him losing the narrative. And she didn't rush to take it. She just stood there and let the room notice. Over the next hour, Nia was introduced to investors, architects, donors, and power couples who treated her like she mattered because she spoke like she knew what she was talking about. And she did. 15 years married to a developer means you learn things whether you're invited to or not. When Nia mentioned zoning changes and coastal regulations, a man named Terrence Caldwell, an investor with expensive cufflinks, leaned in like he was hearing something rare. I didn't know you were that informed, Terrence said. Nia smiled gently. I listen, and I study. Malcolm laughed nervously. She just hears me talk at home, he said quickly. Osmosis. Nia's eyes didn't flicker. Actually, she said, voice even, I've been studying it myself. The table quieted slightly. Then Terrence nodded slowly, impressed. Malcolm's gaze sharpened in warning. Nia's calm didn't change. Because this was part of the silent wife strategy too. Not just legal preparation. Social repositioning. If Malcolm's empire was going to fall, Nia needed witnesses who could say, she belongs here. And the room, quietly, was starting to agree. Then Brielle King appeared. She moved into the ballroom wearing black like a declaration. Her eyes found Malcolm immediately, and Malcolm like a fool lit up. Nia watched the exchange. Not with jealousy, with clarity. Brielle approached their circle with a smile that looked polite until you felt the edge. Chairman Whitaker, she said smoothly. Dr. Whitaker. Malcolm. Always the star of the season. Her gaze slid to Nia. Mrs. Holloway, Brielle added. What an interesting dress. Interesting. The word carried the same tone as devoted had carried months ago. A compliment that was actually a shove. Nia smiled. Thank you, Brielle. Brielle's eyes flicked over the gold embroidery, the fit, the way the gown seemed to turn Nia into a woman people couldn't ignore. Something dark moved behind Brielle's smile. Possessiveness, competition, that win-lose obsession Kendra had warned about. As the night continued, Nia felt herself growing more grounded, more present. The attention wasn't intoxicating. It was validating in a way that felt almost painful, like remembering what it felt like to be seen. But every time Nia began to shine in conversation, Malcolm found a way to cut her down with a joke, a comment, a smirk that suggested she was lucky to be there. And Brielle's presence kept tightening the air like a cord being pulled. Dinner was served. Applause rose and fell. Awards were announced. Malcolm accepted praise like it was oxygen, smiling, bowing slightly, soaking it all in. And Nia, seated beside him, watched the performance. She watched him glance toward Brielle between speeches. She watched Brielle watch him like a claim. She watched the room, and she understood something then, deeper than any contract. This wasn't about love. This was about ownership. People. Reputations. Narratives. And Malcolm had owned the narrative of their marriage for years. Tonight, Nia felt the narrative slipping. After dessert, when the room buzzed with wine and gossip and the soft chaos of people waiting for the next announcement, Nia excused herself. "I'll be right back," she said. Malcolm barely nodded, already turned toward someone else. The women's lounge was quiet compared to the ballroom, all marble and soft lighting meant to soothe. Nia stepped up to the mirror, took a breath, and reached for her lipstick. Then she heard heels. Slow, deliberate. And she knew. She didn't turn right away. She finished smoothing her lipstick like she had all the time in the world. Brielle's voice slid through the room. "Well," she said, "look at you." Nia turned slowly and faced her. Brielle stood near the entrance, arms folded, eyes sharp. The perfect wife, Brielle continued, still playing her part. Nia's expression remained calm. I didn't realize there were roles assigned. Oh, there are, Brielle said, stepping closer. Some women just don't know when their role is over. Nia held her gaze. This was it. Not the legal moment, the human moment. Brielle's smile turned cruel. He doesn't love you anymore, she said, like she was reading a menu. He's with you because it's convenient. Because you've trained yourself to be easy. Nia's voice stayed soft. You seem very sure. Brielle laughed. I'm sure because he tells me the truth. He tells me how quiet you are. How predictable. She gestured vaguely at Nia's gown. This little costume doesn't change what you are. Nia tilted her head slightly. And what do you think I am? Brielle's eyes narrowed. An obstacle. There it was. Not romance. Strategy. Brielle stepped closer until Nia could smell her perfume, something expensive and sharp, like citrus cut with steel. Here's my offer, Brielle said. Disappear. Ask for the divorce. Take whatever little settlement you can get. Don't make this ugly. Nia's eyes didn't blink. And if I don't? She asked. Brielle's jaw tightened. Her voice dropped, low and venomous. Then I'll make you. Nia inhaled slowly. The old Nia might have felt fear. The old Nia might have tried to negotiate, to keep peace, to avoid embarrassment. But Nia Holloway had spent months transforming pain into preparation. And in that moment, she felt something settle in her bones. Immovable. Brielle, Nia said quietly. You're confusing attention with power. Brielle's eyes flashed. And that flash anger, humiliation, the need to win was the crack in her composure. Her hand rose before she fully decided to do it. The slap cracked across the marble room like a gunshot. Nia's head turned slightly with the impact. Her cheek burned instantly, a hot bloom spreading under her skin. For a second, the room held its breath. Brielle stood there, chest rising, eyes bright with satisfaction. That, Brielle whispered, is for forgetting your place. Nia lifted her hand to her cheek slowly, not dramatic, not shaking, just measuring. And when she looked back at Brielle, her eyes weren't wet. They were clear, cold, calculating. In a voice so steady, it sounded almost gentle. Nia said, You just signed your own exit. Then she walked past Brielle and out of the lounge, her heels clicking softly down the hallway like a countdown. Back toward the ballroom, back toward Malcolm, back toward the lights. Because the next part of this story, the part Malcolm thinks he can laugh his way through, is the part that turns a bruise into a blueprint. Nia didn't rush back into the ballroom. She walked, measured, quiet, upright. The hallway outside the women's lounge was lined with framed art abstract pieces that looked expensive because they were confusing. Her heels clicked softly against the polished stone, a sound too small for what had just happened. The sting on her cheek pulsed with every heartbeat, but her face stayed still, as if pain had become something she observed instead of something that owned her. She reached the doorway and stepped into the light. The ballroom was still buzzing, glasses clinking, laughter folding into music. People leaning close to trade secrets dressed up as compliments. Then someone saw her. A woman at a nearby table frowned, eyes narrowing. Another guest leaned to whisper. Within seconds, attention spread like spilled wine. The mark on Nia's cheek wasn't subtle. It was a clean, ugly red that didn't match the elegance of her gown. It looked wrong in that room. It looked like reality crashing the party. Dr. Yvette Whitaker appeared beside her first, moving with the smooth urgency of someone who understood reputations and injuries. Nia, she said softly. What happened? Nia's fingers tightened around the small clutch in her hand. Her voice didn't shake. Brielle and I had a conversation, she said. She hit me. The words dropped into the air like a stone into still water. For a moment, the room didn't react. It froze, as if everyone needed a second to decide whether to believe what they'd just heard. Then Brielle King stepped into view. She came from the hallway with her chin lifted and her mouth already arranged in a smile that looked polite from far away and poisonous up close. She didn't look like a woman who'd lost control. She looked like a woman who believed she could rewrite what happened simply by standing tall. Malcolm noticed the shift in energy and turned. He was mid-conversation with two investors, hands moving as he talked, the confident rhythm of a man used to owning every room he entered. When he saw Naya's face, his smile faltered just for a fraction. Not concern, not shock, annoyance. Like she had brought a problem into his spotlight. He walked over, still wearing the charm he used like cologne. "What is going on?" he asked, eyes flicking between Naya and Brielle. Naya looked at him. For a single breath, a small, almost foolish part of her remembered what a husband was supposed to do. The old instinct, the old hope, hell protect me, hell defend me, hell finally see me. She could feel the room waiting. Chairman Curtis Whitaker had gone still. Terence Caldwell stopped chewing. A few women at the head table exchanged looks that said, "This matters." Nia kept her voice clear. "Brielle slapped me in the restroom." Silence spread outward, thick and heavy. It swallowed the music, swallowed the laughter, swallowed the whole pretty illusion of the night. Brielle's smile didn't move. She blinked slowly, the picture of innocence rehearsed in advance. "I don't know what she's talking about," she said sweetly. "I barely even spoke to her." Malcolm looked at Naya's cheek again, and Naya watched his face the way she had learned to watch storms. Any sign of humanity, any crack in his ego, any instinct to stand beside his wife. He stared at her for a beat too long. Then his mouth curved, and he laughed. Not a nervous, awkward laugh to diffuse the situation. A real laugh, open, amused, cruel in its ease. "Oh, come on," Malcolm said, waving a hand like he was brushing away a fly. "Nia, you always do the most. You probably bumped into the counter and now you're blaming Brielle." The air shifted. People's expressions tightened. Somewhere behind Malcolm, a woman's jaw clenched hard enough to be visible. Nia felt something inside her go perfectly still. Malcolm glanced around at the faces watching him, and that's when he decided to perform. He leaned into it. The way a man leans into a joke that gets him attention. "Maybe this will teach her her place," he said, loud enough for the circle of guests to hear. The words weren't just an insult. They were a declaration. A public branding. And as soon as he said them, Nia understood the real truth of her marriage in one clean, brutal sentence. Malcolm didn't just want her quiet, he wanted her small. He wanted her humiliation to be part of his image. He wanted a wife he could display and dismiss at will, an accessory that never spoke back. Nia inhaled slowly. Her eyes didn't shine with tears. They sharpened. She looked at Malcolm with a calm so controlled it unsettled even him. The room waited for her to crumble, to shout, to plead, to make a scene that would let Malcolm call her dramatic again. But Nia did something else. She nodded once, slowly, like she had just received confirmation of a fact she already suspected. "You're right," she said, voice soft enough to make people lean in. "I do need to learn my place." Malcolm's smile widened, satisfied. He thought head won. He thought this was the part where she went quiet again, where she swallowed the humiliation like Shed swallowed everything else. He didn't understand what Head just handed her. Nia turned. No dramatic exit. No trembling hands. No breakdown in the hallway. Just a straight-backed walk through the ballroom, her midnight blue gown moving like dark water around her legs. Conversations parted around her like a current. Faces followed her, some shocked, some sympathetic, some suddenly respectful, in that sober way people get when they realize they've misjudged someone. She didn't look at Brielle again. Brielle wasn't the real problem. Brielle was just the final proof. Outside, the air felt different, cooler, saltier, sharp against her skin. The hotel's entrance glowed under soft lights as valet attendants moved quietly in the background, pretending not to stare. A black sedan waited near the curb. Leon Lee Carter stood by the passenger door, hands clasped, posture professional. He was Kendra's driver, discreet, quiet, the kind of man who heard everything and repeated nothing. He glanced at Naya's face and didn't react. Not out of indifference. Out of respect. "Mrs. Holloway," he said gently. "Home?" Nia paused for a moment, standing under the warm hotel lights with the ocean breeze brushing her bruised cheek. She could hear muffled music from inside, the party still going, as if pain was just background noise. She looked out at the dark road, then back at Lee. "Give me 3 minutes," she said. "I need to make a call." Lee nodded once and stepped away, turning slightly so she had privacy without truly leaving her alone. Nia pulled out her phone. Kendra answered on the second ring, her voice immediate. "Talk to me." Nia's eyes stayed on the hotel doors. "He laughed," she said. A short silence. Kendra exhaled through her nose. "Okay." "And he said it," Nia continued. "The sentence." Kendra didn't ask which one. She already knew the type. Nia's voice lowered. "Execute the plan," she said. "Tonight." Kendra's tone snapped into something colder. "You're sure?" Nia didn't hesitate. "I'm done being an accessory." Another pause, this one filled with motion you couldn't see, gears turning, calls being cued. "Meet me at the office," Kendra said. 3 a.m. Well sign. 8 a.m. The banks go live. Nia's mouth didn't smile, but something inside her did. Not joy. Alignment. 3 a.m. Nia repeated. Kendra's voice softened just enough to sound human. "Nia, you're about to change your life. Keep your head clear." Nia touched her cheek once, then dropped her hand. "My head is clear," she said. "That's why it's happening." She ended the call, slid the phone into her clutch, and looked at the building one last time. All that gold light. All that expensive laughter. All that false safety. Then she nodded to Lee. "Take me home." The ride back to Brickell was quiet. The city lights blurred past like reflections on water. Lee didn't speak, and Nia didn't need him to. Her mind wasn't spiraling anymore. It was sequencing. Back at the penthouse, she didn't turn on any lights. She moved through the darkness like she'd lived there all her life, because she went straight to her sewing studio. Not to cry, not to hide, but because she'd prepared something there weeks ago. A thin, organized folder tucked behind fabric bolts and pattern paper. Documents Malcolm had never seen. Copies. Confirmations. Pages Kendra had already drafted with blank signature lines waiting like traps. Nia opened the folder under a small lamp and began signing. One page, then the next. Each signature felt less like revenge and more like a receipt. At midnight, Malcolm stumbled in smelling like champagne and arrogance. He didn't notice her absence. He didn't notice anything unless it threatened him. He fell into bed and slept. Nia stayed awake, because some women cry after humiliation, and some women calculate. At 2:48 a.m., she packed a small travel bag, passport, a few pieces of jewelry that were truly hers, essential documents, and a simple pair of flats. She didn't take much. The old life could keep its decorations. At 3 a.m., Lee was waiting downstairs as promised, and by 3:20 a.m., Nia was sitting at Kendra Vaughn's conference table, pen in hand, signing the last pages that would tilt an entire empire. Kendra watched her with the calm of a surgeon. "Once this triggers," she said, "you don't chase him. You don't argue. You don't explain. Communication goes through me." Nia nodded, eyes on the paper. "He doesn't deserve my voice anymore." Kendra slid one final document forward. "This is the transfer of majority interest. This is the lock." Nia read it once, then again, not because she doubted it, because she wanted to feel the truth of it in her bones. Then she signed. At 7:58 a.m., Kendra's screen lit up with incoming calls and secure links. Calvin Brooks was already on standby, voice crisp, procedural. This wasn't gossip. This was process. At 8 a.m. Exactly. The banking systems opened. And the chain reaction began. Corporate accounts tied to Holloway Development froze under court-recognized authority. Access permissions changed. Automated alerts went out like alarms. A man who had built his identity on control lost control in under 60 seconds. Nia didn't cheer. She didn't cry. She sat very still as Calvin confirmed. The actions have executed. The accounts are frozen pending review. Majority control is recognized. Kendra's eyes met hers. It's done. Outside, Miami woke up. The same sun rose. The same boats moved across the bay. The same towers glittered with expensive lies. But somewhere across the city, Malcolm Holloway's phone was about to start ringing. And for the first time in a long time, Nia Holloway didn't feel afraid of the morning. By 8:07 a.m., Malcolm Holloway's phone had already betrayed him. Not with gossip, with notifications. His screen lit up in rapid, brutal sequence bank alerts, access denials, automated compliance messages, written in the kind of language that doesn't care how charming you are. The first one hit like a pebble. Transfer failed. Then the next. Account restricted. Contact legal compliance. Then the one that turned his blood cold. Ownership authority updated. Malcolm sat up in bed like the mattress had shocked him. The room was still dim, curtains drawn, the faint Miami sun pressing at the edges like it wanted in. He reached for the nightstand, irritation already forming because his first instinct in every crisis was to blame someone else for interrupting his comfort. "Nia!" he called out, voice rough with sleep and entitlement. "Nia! Come here!" Silence. He called again, louder, already angry. "Nia!" Nothing. That should have been his first clue that something was wrong. In 15 years, Nia had never made him repeat himself. Not because she enjoyed obedience, because she understood consequences. A man like Malcolm punishes what he can't control. He swung his legs out of bed and marched through the penthouse, phone still buzzing in his hand. Kitchen, spotless, no coffee, no breakfast. No soft proof that his world was running the way he liked. Living room, quiet, too quiet. He checked her studio like a man checking a closet for a missing coat. Empty, the lamp off, the work table clean. Then he saw it. On the counter, a single envelope. No heart, no perfume, no dramatic note. Just his name, written neatly, Malcolm. His hands moved fast, tearing it open. Inside was one sheet of paper, a copy of a legal notice stamped and dated, with Kendra Vaughn's name at the top and Nia's signature beneath. The words were simple, clinical, final. All corporate communications and inquiries are to be directed through counsel. Malcolm's mouth went dry. He stared at the page like he could intimidate it into changing. Then he ran. Not to find Nia because he didn't know where she was. To find power. He threw on clothes, not even bothering to match his belt, and stormed into the elevator. He called his bank first because money is where men like Malcolm keep their dignity. The call connected. "Mr. Holloway," a voice said, crisp and cautious. "This is Calvin Brooks with corporate compliance. You need to come in." Malcolm gripped the phone harder. "Freeze my accounts and then tell me to come in like I'm asking for a loan." "Sir," Calvin replied evenly, "the accounts are frozen under valid authority. Our institution is obligated to comply." Malcolm's laughter was sharp, panicked. "Authority? Whose authority?" A pause, the kind that sounded like someone flipping to the right page. "Your majority holder," Calvin said. Malcolm's breath caught. "I am the majority holder." There was another pause, this one colder. "No," Calvin said, "you are not." The line didn't disconnect, but the world inside Malcolm did. His mind reached for explanations the way a drowning man reaches for air. A mistake. A hack. A competitor. Anything but the truth. He drove straight to the bank, suit wrinkled, eyes wild behind his polished face. He demanded meetings. He threatened lawsuits. He made a scene so loud security came to the edge of the glass-walled office to watch him, ready, and still nothing moved for him. Paper didn't flinch. Procedures didn't apologize. By 10:30, he was at Holloway Development Group's headquarters, convinced the building would recognize him like a loyal dog. It didn't. The lobby felt wrong. There were new faces in clean executive suits speaking quietly to his staff. Renee Johnson, his longtime assistant, stood behind the front desk with an expression Malcolm had never seen on her before. Not fear. Distance. "Good morning, Mr. Holloway," she said, formal. "Careful. Where is everyone?" he snapped. "Why are these people in my office?" Renee swallowed and slid an envelope across the desk like she didn't want her fingerprints on it. "We received documentation this morning. There has been a change in leadership structure. Access permissions have been updated." Malcolm's eyes narrowed. "Who authorized that?" Renee's gaze lifted, steady for the first time in years. "Mrs. Holloway," she said quietly. That name, Mrs. Holloway, hit Malcolm like an insult, like a joke. Because in his mind, Mrs. Holloway was someone who made coffee and kept quiet and smiled at galas like a background decoration, not someone who could lock him out of his own life. He stumbled backward half a step, then caught himself and reached for the one thing he still believed in: Brielle. His phone shook in his hand as he called her. Straight to voicemail. He tried again. Voicemail. His throat tightened. "Brielle, pick up," he muttered, walking out of the building like a man escaping a fire. "Pick up." He drove to the condo he kept for secrets, an apartment head rented under a corporate LLC, furnished in neutral tones like it was meant for temporary pleasure, not real life. He unlocked the door and stepped inside. Empty. Not messy, empty. Not she left in a hurry, empty. Erased. No shoes by the couch, no perfume in the bathroom. No hair products, no photos, no evidence she had ever existed in that space. Just clean silence. His phone rang. Unknown number. He snatched it like oxygen. "Brielle?" Her voice came through calm, distant. "Malcolm." He closed his eyes. "Thank God. Where are you?" "Something is happening. My accounts, my company," I heard. She cut in. "Not unkind, just uninterested. That's why I'm calling." "Come here," he demanded. "Well, figure it out." "Well, Malcolm," Brielle said, and her tone shifted, colder, flatter. "I'm at the airport." His heart kicked. "What?" "A firm in Atlanta offered me a role," she said. "Better money. Better visibility." His mind couldn't keep up. "Brielle. This is temporary. You know me. I'll fix it." A pause. Then Brielle exhaled, a small sound that carried something like disgust more at him than at the situation. "I watched you last night," she said. "The way you laughed. The way you let it happen. The way you—" She stopped, choosing the sharpest truth. If you could humiliate your wife in public, you could humiliate anyone. And now you don't even have the power to make it worth the risk. Malcolm's voice cracked. "I love you." Brielle's laugh was soft, almost bored. "No, you love being admired. Don't confuse those things." Then she said the sentence that ended him. "What we had was convenience. And you're no longer convenient." The line went dead. Malcolm stood in the erased apartment, surrounded by the echo of his own breathing, and for the first time in his adult life, he had to face the fact that the Trophy Husband Betrayal wasn't just about cheating. It was about emptiness. He had built a life where love was optional, but control was everything. And now control was gone. 2 weeks later, a different kind of room held Nia Holloway. New York City, a hotel suite above the city lights. The air smelled like crisp fabric and quiet confidence. Nia stood in front of a mirror, adjusting a champagne-colored blazer tailored to her frame like it had been waiting for her body all along. The invitation to speak had arrived fast, so fast it felt unreal. But Kendra had explained it with one calm sentence. When the world smells blood, it watches. When it smells power, it follows. The International Conference of Women Leaders in Real Estate was packed with women who didn't clap for pretty stories, they clapped for strategy. When Nia stepped onto the stage, she didn't perform pain. She offered clarity. She spoke about ownership, about reading what you sign, about how quiet doesn't mean ignorant, about how a silent wife strategy isn't weakness, it's preparation, in a world that expects women to be careless with their own lives. During Q&A, Denise Harper, sharp-eyed, veteran journalist, asked what everyone really wanted to ask. "Mrs. Holloway, people say this happened overnight. How did you take control so quickly?" Nia smiled, small and steady. "It wasn't quick," she said. "It was quiet." The room went still in the way rooms do when they recognize a truth they've lived. And somewhere, deep in that stillness, Nia felt something lift off her chest, a weight she hadn't even realized she was carrying. Later that night, in the quiet of her suite, her phone buzzed with a message from Kendra. Divorce papers finalized, non-compete signed, confidentiality secured. You're free. Nia stared at the word free until it softened. Freedom didn't start with a signature. It started the night she decided to stop being invisible. The Mistress Bathroom Showdown had been loud, but the real ending, the legal power flip, the empire seized overnight, had been silent, and that silence was the point. Because the lesson wasn't revenge. The lesson was recognition. Patience is not permission. Preparation is not cruelty. Preparation is survival. If you stayed with me to the end, thank you. And now I want to hear from you, because stories like this always split the room. Was Nias move justice? Or was it cold-blooded? Drop your answer in the comments and tell me what time you're watching and where you're listening from, city, state, or country. And if you want more real-life drama stories like this, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Hit like to help this video reach more people and to give me the motivation to keep bringing you stories that are sharp, chilling, and unforgettable. Now go ahead and tap the end screen. I've got 2 more life stories waiting for you, and trust me, you're going to want to see what happens next.